I was standing at gate 14 when I watched my husband's entire family disappear behind a curtain I wasn't invited past. First class boarding, group 1, the flight attendant called, and 11 people I've shared 100 holiday dinners with filed forward with their little leather tags swinging off their carry-ons. Nobody looked back. Nobody wondered where I was. As far as they knew, I wasn't coming at all. That's the part they got wrong. But we'll get to the gate. We'll get to exactly what happened when I walked through that curtain myself, because I did, and I want you to sit with that for a minute before I explain how I got there. This story starts 8 months earlier, with a seating chart nobody thought I'd ever see, a spreadsheet tab labeled quietly, almost carelessly, as if the people organizing it never imagined anyone outside the family would open it. I opened it. Welcome back to Shadow Revenge Stories, where the quiet ones eventually stop asking for permission. If stories about being underestimated by your own family speak to you, stay close, because what I did with that spreadsheet is the whole reason I'm telling you this. My name is Rachel Coleman. I'm 36, and if you asked anyone who knows me casually, they'd tell you I'm the practical one. Not boring, just careful. I balance a checkbook the old-fashioned way because I like watching the numbers stay honest. I drive a car with 90,000 miles on it and no regrets. I've never once, in 14 years of marriage, bought something I couldn't pay off by the time the statement arrived. That's not a virtue I chose. It's a habit built by growing up in a house where money was a math problem before it was ever a comfort. My husband Mark grew up differently. Not wildly rich, but comfortable enough that his family never had to think twice about anything, and somewhere along the way, that turned into a family. Religion. In the Coleman family, money isn't just money. It's a scorecard. Who upgraded their kitchen? Who's flying where this year? Who got the nicer seat, the nicer gift, the nicer nod of approval at Thanksgiving? Mark's mother, Diane, has a way of asking what something cost before she asks if you liked it. I noticed this early, back when Mark and I were only dating, and I told myself it wasn't my business how his family kept score. I wasn't marrying his family. I was marrying him. That belief held up fine for about the first 2 years. Then came the small things. The Christmas gift exchange where my name mysteriously got left off the adult sibling list 2 years running, an oversight, Diane called it, both times. The family beach house invitations that always seemed to land after the good weeks were already taken. The way seating charts at big dinners just happened to put Mark near his brothers while I ended up near the kids' table, close enough to still be helpful, far enough not to matter. I adjusted. That's the word I'd use if I'm honest. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that Mark shouldn't have to choose between his wife and his mother over a seating chart, of all things. I smoothed it over so many times I stopped noticing I was doing it. I brought my own snacks so I wouldn't need anything from their kitchen. I learned to laugh at jokes about budgeting that were really jokes about me. I made myself easy to overlook because overlooking me had apparently become easier for everyone than making room. Mark never saw most of it. Not because he didn't care, but because I never told him. I decided a long time ago that peace was worth more than being right, and for years, I believed that math. If you've ever quietly rearranged yourself to keep a family functioning, you already know exactly what that arithmetic feels like from the inside. I was good at it. I was so good at it that by the time the wedding invitation for his sister's destination wedding arrived, nobody thought to ask if I'd notice what was missing. I noticed. Diane Coleman built her identity around being the one who decides. She's the kind of woman who says, "We're all so blessed," the way other people say, "Excuse me," a reflex, a placeholder, a way of moving past the real sentence underneath. Blessed, in Diane's vocabulary, has always meant visible. If it wasn't photographed, if it wasn't upgraded, if it wasn't the kind of thing you could mention casually at a dinner party, it didn't fully count. Her daughter, Vanessa, learned the language early and speaks it fluently. Vanessa is 31, engaged to a man named Grant whose family owns 3 car dealerships in Connecticut, and since the engagement, her posts have taken on the tone of a lifestyle brand launch. Champagne flutes on private balconies. A ring photographed from 4 different angles before anyone even asked to see it. Vanessa doesn't attend events. She curates appearances at them. The wedding itself was never going to be modest. Turks and Caicos, a private villa compound, a guest list capped not by friendship but by who fits the aesthetic, a phrase I actually heard Diane use on the phone once while I was folding laundry in the next room. I did the math out of habit, the same habit that balances my checkbook, and landed somewhere north of $400,000 once you counted the villas, the florist flown in from Miami, and the welcome dinner that apparently required its own lighting designer. This wasn't the first time travel had quietly told me where I stood. 2 years earlier, the whole family had gone to Diane's 60th birthday trip in Napa, 4 days of wine country and a chef's table Diane had been planning for a year. Mark and I weren't left off the list exactly. We were left off the group flight, the one everyone else took together, business class, champagne before takeoff, a photo Diane posted with the caption, "My whole world in one cabin." Mark and I flew separately, economy, and arrived a day later because that was the flight we could actually afford. Nobody apologized. Nobody seemed to notice there was anything to apologize for. What I remember most isn't the flight. It's a comment I overheard afterward, Diane on the phone with her sister, laughing about how nice it had been to have just the people who really belong at these things, all together in one cabin. I was standing 4 feet away, unpacking groceries, invisible in the specific way you become when someone has decided, without ever saying it to your face, that you're adjacent to the family rather than inside it. I never told Mark what I heard. I told myself it wasn't worth starting something over one sentence, one flight, one cabin. But I filed it away the way I file everything, quietly, precisely, in a place I don't forget. So when the wedding logistics email came through 8 months later with a spreadsheet attached, I already knew, before I even opened it, exactly what I was going to find. The email arrived on a Tuesday, subject line Vanessa and Grant. Travel details attached, and I opened the spreadsheet the way I open every spreadsheet, scanning left to right, name by name. Mark's parents, first class, confirmed. Mark's brothers and their wives, first class, confirmed. Aunts, uncles, the second cousins who'd known Vanessa for maybe a decade combined, first class, confirmed. I scrolled down looking for Coleman, Mark and Rachel, and found nothing. Not economy. Not a placeholder. Nothing, as if the row itself had simply been deleted along with our names. I told myself it was an oversight before I even finished the thought, because that's the shape my mind has learned to make when something like this happens. I called Diane, kept my voice light, mentioned the missing line as casually as I could manage. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Oh, that travel agent is hopeless, I'll have her fix it," in the same breezy tone she uses for a wrong dinner reservation. I said thank you. I hung up and told Mark it had just been a mix-up, nothing worth mentioning twice. He nodded and went back to the game on TV, and some part of me sat down hard on that word, oversight, and tried to make myself believe it was solid enough to stand on. 3 weeks passed. No corrected spreadsheet came. I didn't push, because pushing felt like accusing, and I've never been someone who accuses without proof. I told myself the wedding was still months away, that there was time, that Diane's assistant was probably buried in florist contracts and welcome bag logistics, that I was reading intention into what was probably just chaos. I've built a whole life on giving people that kind of room. Then, one night in early spring, I was added by mistake to a text thread meant for the inner circle, Diane's phrase, not mine, a group chat originally set up for the bridal shower that had clearly outlived its original purpose. I wasn't supposed to be in it. Someone, probably Vanessa's cousin, had added the wrong contact. I almost left the thread the second I noticed, out of habit, out of not wanting to intrude on something that wasn't meant for me. I stayed long enough to see one message from Diane, sent at 11:47 at night, that I have not been able to unread since. Just keep first class to family who matter for the photos, we don't need the whole guest list looking cramped in coach shots. Someone replied with a laughing emoji. Someone else asked if that included Mark's wife, and Diane's answer came 30 seconds later. She'll understand, she's practical about that stuff. I sat with my phone in my lap for a long time after that, feeling something cold and very quiet settle into place, the sensation of finally hearing, in someone else's exact words, a thing you'd already known for years but had never let yourself fully say. Practical about that stuff. That was the whole verdict, delivered without malice, almost fondly, the way you'd describe a piece of furniture that never complains about where it's put. I left the group chat without a word. I didn't confront anyone. I told myself, one more time, that there would be a better moment for this than 8 weeks before a wedding Mark was so looking forward to. I told myself I could hold all of that quietly until the wedding, the way I'd held everything else. Then came the engagement dinner, 6 weeks before Turks and Caicos. 40 people crowded into Diane's dining room and patio, Prosecco going around on trays, everyone dressed like the event itself was a rehearsal for the real thing. I was refilling water glasses near the kitchen island, still useful even at a party in my honor, apparently, when Vanessa walked over with her champagne flute and that smile she wears for cameras and family both. "So excited you guys are coming," she said, loud enough for the small cluster near her to hear. "I mean, I know it's a stretch for you too, money-wise, but Grant's parents offered to cover the extra flight difference if you wanted to actually sit with the family instead of coach. Just let me know." She said it lightly, almost kindly, the way you'd offer someone a coat they clearly can't afford on their own. 3 of Grant's cousins laughed, not cruelly, just the easy laugh of people who've never once had to think about what a flight costs. Diane, standing 4 feet away, didn't correct her. She smiled into her glass instead, the smile of someone watching a plan land exactly where she'd aimed it. I stood there with a water pitcher in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in 14 years of adjusting myself smaller, a kind of stillness that wasn't calm at all, just very, very quiet. Every dismissed instinct I talked myself out of, the missing spreadsheet row, the 1147 text, Diane's voice on the phone in Napa, all of it arrived at once and stopped being separate incidents. It became a pattern with my name written all over it in someone else's handwriting. If you've ever had a family member say something cruel to you with a smile on their face, in front of people, and felt everyone around you decide it was easier to laugh than to notice, tell me in the comments what you did next. I read every single one of them. I didn't say anything back to Vanessa that night. I set the water pitcher down carefully, the way I do everything, and I excused myself to the bathroom, where I stood at the sink for exactly as long as it took to stop my hands from shaking. Then I went back out, smiled, finished the evening like nothing had happened, because that has always been my particular skill, finishing the evening like nothing happened. But in the car on the way home, with Mark humming along to the radio, oblivious, happy, I made a decision I hadn't let myself make in 14 years of practical, quiet, understanding restraint. I decided I was done being practical about that stuff. I didn't say a word to anyone about that decision. Not to Diane, not to Vanessa, not even fully to Mark, not yet. Instead, the next morning, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table with my coffee still steaming and did the one thing I actually know how to do better than anyone in that family. I planned. I booked our own flights, first class, out of my own savings account, the one I'd built for exactly this kind of quiet emergency without ever knowing what shape it would take. I found a villa 2 doors down from the compound, smaller, simpler, but with the same view of the same water, and paid for it outright. I bought a dress in a shade of deep emerald that had nothing to do with fitting in and everything to do with being unmistakable. I told Mark only that I'd handled our travel, and something in my voice must have carried more than the words did, because he looked at me for a long moment and simply said, "Okay." He didn't ask what changed. Maybe some part of him already knew. We landed in Providenciales 2 days before the wedding, walked off that plane in first class like it had always been ours, because as far as anyone watching was concerned, it had been. When we arrived at the welcome dinner, tan, rested, dressed like we belonged exactly where we were standing, I watched Diane's face do something I'd never seen it do before. A flicker, quick and involuntary, the look of someone doing fast arithmetic on a number that refused to make sense. Vanessa found me near the bar an hour in, her smile a half-second slower to arrive than usual. "I didn't realize you guys upgraded," she said, careful now, testing the ground. "We didn't need anyone's help," I said, calm, pleasant, holding my glass exactly the way she'd been holding hers all week. "We're practical about that stuff." I watched the words land exactly where I'd aimed them. She didn't have anything to say back, and for the first time in 14 years, I wasn't the one left standing in a silence I had to fill. Word traveled the way it always does at these events, quietly, through the people refilling their own drinks near the bar instead of being served. Grant's grandmother, a sharp, unbothered woman named Eleanor, asked me at the reception why the photo tears, her words, not mine, had been decided the way they had, loud enough that a few heads turned. Diane's answer came out thin, unconvincing, the kind of explanation that sounds worse the longer it runs. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The math was doing its own talking now, in front of the exact people it had once been arranged to impress. By the time the wedding photos went up online weeks later, I noticed something Diane surely hadn't intended. In almost every shot from the welcome dinner onward, Mark and I were simply, undeniably there, present in a way no seating chart or flight tier had accounted for. Nobody had cropped us out this time, mostly because nobody had thought they'd need to. Since that trip, I've stopped adjusting myself smaller to keep other people comfortable. I still bring my own snacks sometimes, old habits, but I no longer explain missing spreadsheet rows away before anyone's even asked me to. Mark noticed the shift before I ever said a word about why, and when I finally told him everything, all of it, from Napa to the 11:47 text, he didn't ask why I'd waited so long. He just asked what he could do differently. That, it turns out, was the real upgrade. Here's what I know now that I didn't back at that gate. Belonging was never something they were allowed to assign me. It was mine the entire time. If your family has ever tried to seat you somewhere smaller than you are, share this with the person who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments what you finally stopped asking permission for.